At the beginning of the malady, certain swellings, either on the groin or under the armpits, waxed to the bigness of a common apple, others to the size of an egg. Those words were not written by a horror novelist. They were recorded by the Italian poet Giovanni Boccaccio in the 14th century. He was describing the end of the world, or at least what looked like the end of the world to the people living through it. We are talking about the Bubonic Plague, the Black Death. Historians believe this pandemic resulted in the deaths of anywhere from 75 to 200 million people. Let that number sink in. 200 million. Imagine if you looked at your phone right now and half of your contacts were gone. Imagine walking through New York or London and every second person you passed was a corpse. That was the reality of the 14th century.
But history is never just about the dead. It is about the strange, twisted legacy they leave behind. Because in the ashes of this apocalypse, something impossible happened. With the death of so many people, especially the poor, landowners and nobles were forced into a corner. They were required to allow farmers to keep more of the product they farmed, leading to more workers' rights. It sounds insane, doesn't it? How could the worst tragedy in human history actually be a blessing for the working class? How could a disease that rotted your body from the inside out be the reason you have a weekend off today? To understand this paradox, we have to go back. We have to look at a Europe that was already bleeding before the rats even arrived. The year was 1337. Europe was a mess. England and France were at war for 100 years. The origins of this conflict lay with the status of the Duchy of Guyenne. In basic capitalistic terms, this was owned by the British Crown. However, the land itself was in France. It was a diplomatic nightmare. But the real spark happened in 1328. The last direct descendant of Charlemagne, King Charles IV, died. He left no heir. The throne was empty. So the next closest relative stepped up, Edward III, the King of England. He claimed the rule of France in 1337, which was not liked by the French people. As the petty, erratic 100 Years' War raged on, the kings played chess with human lives. They were obsessed with lines on a map. They were obsessed with who owned what title. While the armies marched and the nobles argued, the ordinary people were suffering. They lived in crowded, filthy cities. They were weak from famine, and most importantly, they were distracted. They were looking at the swords of the knights, fearing for their lives from the war. They didn't realize that the real killer wasn't carrying a sword. It was carrying a flea. It moved fast, terrifyingly fast. One day a ship docks in Sicily. The next, the dock workers are dead. Then the town falls silent. Then the next town. The Italian poet Giovanni Boccaccio wrote, "At the beginning of the malady, certain swellings, either on the groin or under the armpits, waxed to the bigness of a common apple, others to the size of an egg, some more and some less, and these the vulgar named plague boils." Imagine the horror. You wake up, you feel a lump, and you know with absolute certainty that you are going to die. There was no medicine, no cure, only prayer, and even the priests were dying. The social fabric tore apart. Mothers abandoned children, husbands abandoned wives. The fear of the plague boils was stronger than love. Now let's pause. The tragedy is horrific, but the aftermath, that is where things get strange. Before the plague, Europe operated on a feudal system. It was a pyramid. At the top, the king, then the nobles, and at the bottom, the millions of peasants who worked the land. In this old world, labor was cheap. Why? Because there were so many people. If a peasant didn't like his wages, the lord could just hire the next one. The nobles held all the power because workers were replaceable. But then the Black Death happened. With the death of so many people, especially the poor, the math changed. Suddenly, the fields were empty, the crops were rotting, the sheep needed shearing, but the workers were gone. They were in the mass graves. For the first time in history, the surviving peasant became a rare commodity. Supply went down, demand went up. It's basic economics. Landowners and nobles were required to allow farmers to keep more of the product they farmed. They had no choice. If they didn't pay better, the peasant would just walk away to the next lord who would. This led to more workers' rights. The survivors ate better food, they wore better clothes, they had more leverage. The absolute power of the feudal lords was broken, not by a revolution of swords, but by a microscopic bacteria.
The Black Death was a nightmare. 200 million lives extinguished. It is a trauma that is etched into our history. But it teaches us a brutal lesson. Sometimes the systems that oppress us, like feudalism, are fragile. Sometimes it takes a catastrophe to shake the foundations of society and allow something new to grow. The plague didn't just kill people, it killed the old world, and from those ashes, the modern working class began to rise.
History is full of these strange connections. For example, did you know that while Europe was dealing with the plague, a man named Genghis Khan was creating a lineage so vast that 8% of men in South Asia descend from him today? But that is a story for another time. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the dark side of history, make sure to like and subscribe. Tell me in the comments, do you think we needed a catastrophe to end feudalism, or would it have happened anyway? I'll see you in the next one.